Thank you, Mr. President. Just on the matter that was just being discussed, I'm on the Finance Committee. There has not been a hearing on this bill, not a single hearing. A markup is not a hearing, and people might say, well, why is that a big deal? Why is that relevant? Because a hearing is an opportunity for the American people to say whether they want this bill or not. A hearing is an opportunity for an economist to come to the Senate and say whether they want this bill or not. A markup, just like the other stuff around here, is a chance for senators to say what's on their mind, not for the American people to be able to say what's on their mind. And that's what I'm thinking about today. And I wanted to start my remarks with a little bit of a history lesson, because this chamber seems to forget what it has said, where it has been, and it's only if you had a case of terrible amnesia that you could support this legislation. When Bill Clinton left the White House, he left his successor a projected surplus of $5.6 trillion. That's what George Bush inherited when he became president. And the Senate was actually having hearings about what to do with the surplus and whether that surplus constituted some sort of threat to the economy. That's what he left behind. Then George Bush, with this Congress, cut taxes in 2001, didn't pay for those tax cuts, didn't need to because they would pay for themselves. That's what they said. It's exactly what they're saying today. It's exactly what they're saying today. Then in 2003, Mr. President, they passed another tax cut and they didn't pay for it. But they said it would pay for itself. And incredibly, the 2003 tax cut came after we had invaded Iraq, under pretext by that administration. And not only did we never ask the American people to pay for those wars, we cut their taxes and put the burden on their children. And Mr. President, that supply-side economics, which is exactly the same movie that we're seeing today, resulted in the worst recession since the Great Depression. We had a 10% unemployment rate when Barack Obama became president of the United States. And guess what else we had? A $1.5 trillion deficit. Not a $5.6 trillion surplus. A $1.5 trillion deficit because of two unpaid for wars, because of two tax cuts that weren't paid for, that were going to pay for themselves, and because they passed something called Medicare Part D, the prescription drug program for seniors, that they didn't pay for. And the minute Barack Obama became president, they said it was his deficit. And they wouldn't lift a finger to help working people in America who had lost their jobs in the worst recession since the Great Depression, brought on by their own economic policies and by the fecklessness of some of the largest banks in this country. They wouldn't lift a finger. Then Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said in 2011, this is in 2011, he said, now we've reached a point where our deficits and debts are so large, they're suffocating job growth, threatening the wider economy, and imperiling entitlements. That's when we were at the depths of a recession we had not seen since the Great Depression. And when Barack Obama left office, the deficit was about $550 billion. Today, it's $660 billion. And as a result of this plan, J.P. Morgan is telling us yesterday, I guess, or the day before, this will be the largest non-recession caused deficit in our history since World War II. What a disgrace. And for what? To give taxes to the wealthiest people in America. This is an unusual thing to do, but I'm putting up the Republicans' chart. This is their chart. Senator from Pennsylvania is on the floor. This is their chart, where they're telling my farmers and ranchers in rural Colorado that they should be satisfied with these percentages they're giving them, these rate cuts they're giving them. You can't eat percentages. You can't feed your family on rate cuts. You can't run your farm or your ranch. Do they think they're not going to get figured out, Mr. President? Colorado's Republicans are too smart for this bill. They are too smart for this bill. So are Colorado's Democrats and Independents. Because unlike us, they actually have to worry about the next generation of Americans. That's all they do. And they know our politics is not up to that. It is not up to the aspirations they have for their kids and for their grandkids. And no piece of legislation could illustrate how right they are than this piece of legislation and the mistruths that have been used to sell it. The president going out to Missouri and saying, this is a middle-class tax cut. This hurts the rich like me. No, it doesn't. And what people are concerned about and what they will be concerned about is their after-tax income as a result of the changes that are being made. And this is the best year, Mr. President. I didn't bring out the worst year. This is 2019. This is what you're going to be getting. Folks, it's great if you're up here, if you're making more than $1 million. Where, by the way, I have not met a person, and I was in business before I came here, Mr. President, not a person in my old work life who says that they've got cash flow problems that this tax cut's going to help them with. I know a lot of people in Colorado, and I'll bet you in Arkansas, and I'll bet you in Pennsylvania, that are still struggling because middle-class family incomes have been flat for 20 years, and the cost of housing, higher ed, early childhood education, and health care are forcing them to make choices that their parents and grandparents never had to make for their kids. What a shame to be taking health care away from 13 million people in this bill, instead of trying to make the system better. This bill rejects all the testimony that we had in hearing after hearing on the Health, Education, and Labor Committee. This is my final slide, Mr. President. This is the math of this bill. This bill takes $34 billion a year, not 1 year, a year. $34 billion in tax cuts a year and gives it to 572,000 taxpayers. That, you can't even see that. I know you can't see it on the TV. It looks like a pencil line because that's the scale. That's how few people that is in our economy. 572,000 people getting $34 billion. If you include the estate tax, which I didn't hear, Mr. President, it's $39 billion. It's $40 billion going to families that are lucky enough to make more than $1 million a year. These are the taxpayers who make $50,000 and less in our economy. There are 90 million of them, not 572,000. There are 90 million of them. They get $14 billion out of this bill. That's an average tax cut of $160, $7.50. These aren't talking points. This is the math that is at the heart of the deal that the Republicans have said is a middle-class tax cut. And you know what's even worse about it? Just like the 01 tax cut, just like the 03 tax cut, they're not paying for it. They are borrowing the money from middle-class families all over the country, from the sons and daughters of teachers and firefighters and police officers. That's who's going to have to pay back that bill. And for what? To end poverty in America? No. To invest in infrastructure or health care or to strengthen our safety net? No. To fritter it away on $34 billion worth of tax cuts for the wealthiest people in America. And I'm going to close just by saying this. I would never, ever, before I got here 9 years ago, have believed that something this cynical could happen on the floor of the Senate. I wouldn't have believed it. And colleagues of mine who've said for years, this is all just about getting to cuts to Medicare and Social Security, Medicaid, I'd say, no, it's not. People care about this. They want to sort out our fiscal condition. I was wrong. They were right. This is about that. And that's what they're going to come back here and do. And it's going to be really hard to withstand it. President Trump, after all this for the last 10 years around here, since we were fighting, trying to fight out of the worst recession since the Great Depression, which we did, by the way, in the name of fiscal responsibility, we had fiscal cliffs. In the name of fiscal responsibility, we had government shutdowns. In the name of fiscal responsibility, we passed 30 temporary budgets that no school district in Colorado could get away with once. And have we managed to restore our fiscal health? No. Are we piled on more debt for our kids and our grandkids? Yeah, and that's what's going to happen here. But it's no wonder when we elected a president, somebody who told the American people and was nominated by the Republican Party and elected by the United States of America, President Trump promised that he would eliminate our debt, quote, over a period of 8 years, that he'd deliver, quote, a giant, beautiful, massive tax cut. That was supposed to be for the forgotten man, unless the people making over $1 million are the forgotten man. He didn't deliver on that. Passed, quote, one of the largest increases in national defense spending in American history while saying, quote, I'm not going to cut Social Security and I'm not going to cut Medicare or Medicaid. There is a job that every American has to do for the next generation of Americans. And that is to leave more opportunity, not less, to the people that are coming after us. And Mr. President, with this bill, it has been so falsely described and written in such a way that it actually denies the middle class in America benefits that it really could use, and does so by putting a bunch more debt on the backs of their children, is something this Senate should reject. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.